Okay, I'm not going to do the typical, hey YouTube, what's going on? Hope you're having when are we uploading this again? Thursday? No, we're going to be reacting to the business side of game development from Tim Cain. This should be fun. This is BizDev. So I'm pretty new to the world of BizDev. I'm like very new to the world of BizDev. So I hope I'm going to learn a lot from this, and we'll see what happens. Can't say, but stopping by for a fish. Nice. Have a great stream. Take care, Caden. Good luck on the fish.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to
Hi,
talk
Tim.
about the business side of game development.
Yeah.
This is an answer to a question by Seth the Guy GD, who asks,
GD stands for game design, probably.
I was wondering if you could explain the business side of the game industry. I know you started Troika. I would love to hear the business stuff about it. I know you
Didn't get a fish? Okay, hold on, give me a sec. I'm pretty sure I set it up. Is it not connected? Try it again. There we go. Sorry about that. If I were to give my 2 cents on the biz dev side of game dev, it's a mixed bag, right? It depends who you talk to. I talk to a lot of like indie publishers and smaller publishers, and these guys are great because they're usually people who have started their own publishing studio after being a developer themselves, and they're pretty nice. Like they like games, they know games, they're casual, they just dress in what I'm dressed in, like some game shirt and some shorts. And yeah, it's like they're really easy to talk to. Of course, they're focused on how they can turn a profit, make this game into a success. But they're pretty nice. And then on the other end you have the suits. Okay? And I am not a big fan of talking to people in game dev wearing suits. Because who the fuck shows up to a game developer event in a suit, right? It's usually people who have no interest in games. They don't really care about players. This is all about money, 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 money. And it's a very different lingo when you talk to them, right? Because when you talk to the people who are just, you can tell that they're game devs. They know games. They love games. You can just talk about it. You can show your passion. You can let your passion just drive the conversation. It doesn't mean you don't, or you shouldn't be business oriented, or you shouldn't focus also on some of the metrics of how we're going to make this game a success, and here's our business plan or our milestone plan. But it's just a more natural way for me to talk, I suppose. And the people who are all business oriented, it's like, nah, what's your market? How many, PPUs, lifetime sales, budget, team, milestone, okay, let's talk money. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we can, but I'd like to focus on making this a good game for players, right? So, I don't know, it's a mixed bag for me. It's tough. It's very different lingo than when you're talking to, like, teammates or your producer and stuff, things like that. A Space Invaders t-shirt and a full suit are the two sides of game devs at conventions. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
you have a video about Troika.
And it's kind of funny, like people from like Tim Kane's era, the entrepreneurs, right? These guys are in like sandals or just tennis shoes, the white tennis shoes, uh, with socks that go up to their ankles, just wearing some t-shirt with some retro game on it, and they are then also the kindest, most knowledgeable, just filled with some ridiculous information and weird stories about game dev. It's great. Maybe a polo. Yeah, maybe a polo.
But could you go further into the money aspect of it? Could you explain starting up a studio and dealing with hiring people, choosing and approaching publishers, getting funding for the game, insurance, banking, PR, office space, costs, advertising, and other things people wouldn't think of?
I think about it. I think about all those things, and they suck. They fucking suck. But he's right. I mean, it's generally, it's right. A lot of people, especially like gamers, don't think about this, or when they're starting their own studio, they're like, okay, I make the company name, I work on the game, and then we win, right? It's like there's so much back end. There's so much. It's why I even talk about like doing 8 hour streams every day is probably not gonna work because there is just so much in the background that I will have to do and do have to do in order to get the company moving forward from a proper business standpoint. But yeah, it's more than you could ever think goes into actually starting a business.
Seth, this is a good question. And as a priority channel member, I'm moving it forward. There's already one on Monday. So yours will get pushed in right in the next in the queue. So you will be seeing this early next week. I'm filming this at the end of the previous week. It's a good question, and I have been thinking about this. I know you asked this a week ago. I wasn't ignoring it. I was thinking about it. I had to think about this one a long time, and let me tell you why, because I have reasons. And after I tell you the reasons, I'm going to tell you the reasons I told you the reasons. Reason one,
I love it.
I only ran one company, and it started 25 years ago. And I don't think I necessarily ran it well. So you asking me to talk about the business side of game development immediately made me go, whoa, should I even be doing this? I decided to.
That's a good point. You know, reminds you of your dad like a lot. It's a good point that he brings up because there's a lot of things I love to talk about. I'd love to lecture like university students on, or have a talk at some game conferences about. But I just still don't feel qualified enough about so many things. I feel like I can only provide my experience and my goals, but that's it. That I shouldn't be looked up to when it comes to running a business, right? Because I haven't run one. We don't have any money, so clearly I'm not successful at raising funding for our company. And even with game design, it's like, yeah, sure, I have like 10 years of game design experience, but what does that really mean? There's still certain genres that I wouldn't touch as a game designer because I just don't know them well enough. I don't play these games. I don't know the market well enough. I could identify what probably makes them popular, but I could be wrong. So game dev just feels like an unending educational lesson. You're always learning. You will never, ever be an expert. At the very most, you can master certain like aspects of game development, but you'll never become an expert. That's an incredible way with words and really strong leadership, and he even works in the software development field, not game development. Cybersecurity, though. Oh shit, cybersec. Some crazy stuff. Don't download porn. Great.
But I also want to say that at the very beginning, at the crucial beginning of Troika, we had Jason's spouse, Sharon Shellman, who had experience at the administrative level in companies.
Smart.
And she handled so many things that would have been hard for us to do. The three of us, Jason, Leonard, and I, had very little experience. I would like to say no experience. So she did things like contacted insurance agents.
It's a good one.
Real estate
That
agents.
was you for a sec.
We, talked to the office people about leasing, the agents for the different offices we want to go about leasing stuff. Now, yes, Jason and Leonard and I would make the final agreements on those, and we would sign whatever documents needed to be done. But Sharon handled vetting a lot of those things. We didn't have to go, oh my God, there's 20 different medical insurance policies we could get. Sharon had already looked through them and said, here, I think these are the three best, and here are the trade-offs.
People like her, they are the backbone for making a company work. And I've known one of those people at pretty much every company that I've worked at, and they are always ridiculously competent individuals, somehow very nice. They're some of the nicest people, but they're also the people that will just not put up with bullshit. Like, they have stuff that they need to get done, and any bullshit, they're not going to put up with it. So, yeah, I mean, people like that, they're the unsung heroes sometimes of making a game development studio run, are the ones that can just handle all the back end stuff, like you said, the insurance, the the leasing, getting things organized, getting people the right papers in front of the right people at the right time. Uh, I love those people.
Great. You can't imagine how amazing it was having someone to do that. And then the third reason it took me a long time to respond to this question is I didn't take a lot of notes on the business side of things. My notes are full of game dev meetings and design ideas and discussions about events that happened during game development and almost nothing about the business side of things. I did find some, and then that reminded me of other things. So I put this together. Now, let me tell you why I did decide to do this despite all those caveats. A lot of people like to talk about things that they have zero experience in. So I thought, well, at least I do have experience in this.
They do.
It was a while ago.
I mean, even I do. Great freeze frame, by the way. But I mean, I will say this. I like to talk about things that I don't know anything about because I don't mind throwing my shit into the ring, as runny and as mushy as it might be. But I try to be upfront about it. Like, I'm going to say what I think I know, but just know that I don't know a lot. That's how I do it. It's like, I'm just going to throw it out here, but just, here's the warning, the red label is, I don't really know what I'm talking about in this matter. I don't really know what I'm talking about with BizDev. I can only share my experience, what I've been taught, and say that that is as much as I know at the moment. So, I'm constantly learning. Every event that I go to, I talk to more BizDev people, and I engage with more publishers, and I learn something new. And I just refine my technique with either communication or with, pitching a game and stuff like that. Get stuff down first, refine later. Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important to, if you have like ideas, especially about your game, just write it down. It does not have to be organized. Use like ChatGPT to organize your notes, but get your notes written down the moment you think of them because you will forget them and then it's gone.
And I'm not necessarily saying I was very good at it, but at least I have experience. And all I need to tell anyone watching this is please beware of people who give you advice who have never ever done the thing.
Yes.
In what they're giving you advice for. Don't look any further than my channel where people tell me how to do game development who've never done it. People tell me how to be a better employer who've never done it. When I'm going to give you this business advice, this is coming from a place of experience. I've been both an employee and an employer. I would like to point out that the ratio, I ran Troika for 7 years, but I've been in the industry for 43, so Troika represents 1/6 of my experience. So I've been mostly an employee, but for about 1/6 of the time, an employer. So with all that behind, let's dive into...
I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm a little afraid to be an employer. I know I'm going to get my ass handed to me with how difficult it is, especially to handle some of the more refined parts of diplomatic employership. Just use that. Let's just pretend that's a word. Especially like maybe firing somebody, disciplining. How do I accurately talk to them and communicate this? Management is so hard, yeah. I mean, my dad's been a business owner for longer than I've been alive, and I picked some stuff up from him, and he's taught me a lot of things, but nothing can really prepare you for just the random things that can happen that you are not prepared to handle that day. Or just going to work in a high emotional state and something bad happens and then you kind of lose it. It's like, and all of this is just so bad, you can't have that happen. But we've kind of talked about that with the ethics. We talk about ethical stuff, right? With our game, that's one of our values, ethics. But that doesn't just mean for players, it also means for employees. And we always talk about it that we are adults making games. And we need to remember that. We can have fun. We should have fun. We're making games. Of course we should have fun. But we're also adults. And sometimes people have bad days. Sometimes people need a break mentally. Sometimes you need to leave early to pick your kids up from something. It doesn't matter what it is. We just need to have that adult human empathy to say, you know what? That was a bad day yesterday. I lost my temper, and I'm sorry for that. That shouldn't have happened. and we just kind of need to move on from that. And that can happen to anybody. It can happen to people in management. It can happen to new hires. It's just we're here to make games. If you're still wanting to make a game, you can have bad days. Nobody's gonna piss on your fire for that, right?
To Seth's questions. Okay, the very first thing that I'm going to say, which he didn't ask about, but I was going to say is you've got to incorporate. If you're going to make your own company, don't just do it as a self-owned thing. I would highly recommend at the very minimum you do a partnership. That's what we did at Troika. It was called an LLC, a limited liability company. It's kind of like a partnership.
He is right. He is right. The reason I did it as a sole member company is for very specific reasons. But as I've said before on this channel, I'm not against taking it to partnership. He is right. Trust me, it is way, way, way easier to do it that way. And it opens up a lot of doors. But it also comes with its own issues that I'm trying to avoid by doing it this way. And if we can avoid it, great. If not, we'll find a different way to handle it. So I'm very curious what he's about to say because he is calling us out hard right now.
With some of the protections of a corporation, or just dive right in and incorporate as like an S corp. Get a lawyer, have them explain this to you. But the reason you need to do this is it will protect you and any assets you have. What you don't want to have happen is some lawsuit happen against your game company, and I can talk about how that can happen. But you don't want that to have happen, and the next thing you know, somebody's coming to repossess your car.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a good point.
Your house or your computer.
Because when you are the sole member, I think what he's meaning is to incorporate and not. Well, it is also sole member because you own it, but technically it is a separate entity. He might be right. He knows more than me on this. I'm going to trust him on this. Yeah, but how would forming a partnership would really protect you from that? I think what he means is to incorporate by make a company, not just try to do it on your own. I think I misunderstood it as him saying, don't do a single member LLC, do a partnership, because he's right that they could come, if you were just like a sole developer, right, and you self-publish, and there is a lawsuit, he's 100% right, they could just come after you directly. But if you have a sole member LLC, it is still a separate entity that you are responsible for. So they wouldn't repossess like your car or house on that in that scenario. I don't believe, but that is take that with a big grain of salt. Top security, like if anything to fall back on if shit goes south. I'm wondering. Hold on, let me see if I can rehear this.
Protections of a corporation or partnership. Self-owned thing. I would highly recommend at the very minimum you do a partnership. That's what we did at Troika. It was called an L.
I'd have to get. I can't tell from what he's saying. I don't know if what he's meaning is don't start a single member LLC, do a partnership at least, or if he means just put it under a company name so that it is a separate legal entity, as opposed to self-publishing where. He's very right. If something goes south, they can come directly after you because that is the person liable in this case, is the named individual who owns this game. And that's a bit separate. Like when you have a company as the shield, the company takes the brunt of the damage. Of course, as a sole member LLC, I am fully responsible for that damage, but my personal assets are separated from my business assets.
LLC, a limited liability
as far as
company.
I know.
It's kind of like a partnership with some of the protections of a corporation, or just dive right in and incorporate as like an S corp. Get a lawyer, have them explain this to you. But the reason you need to do this is it will protect you and any assets you have. What you don't want to have happen is some lawsuit happen against your game company, and I can talk about how that can happen. But you don't want that to have happen, and the next thing you know, somebody's coming to repossess your car, or your house, or your computer, any asset you have that's worth money. If you don't think you need this, let me just tell you that Troika got threatened with a lawsuit 3 times, and never by publishers. A couple times by people who didn't like that we started Troika, and then once by one of our own
It's retarded.
realtors who was mad that we were breaking the lease, but forgot to mention to their lawyer that they'd already rented out the space. So they were claiming a lot of damages that turned out there were no damages. Anyway, people will threaten you with lawsuits all the time. It's nice to have that corporate veil of security. So let's jump into hiring people. When we started Troika, we had a huge advantage over most other companies that were starting, is that when we, Leonard and Jason and I, quit our previous company, this got reported. I saw it in magazines, on websites, in forums.
It does help, yeah.
So people knew.
Yeah, people are like, oh, famous developers who worked on this have quit and started. I mean, that happens nowadays all the time, right? Is former lead of insert big AAA developer quits, starts own studio, and if I assume, especially with like Fantastic Pixel Castle, started by Greg Street. If you guys know him, he used to be the head at Riot. I imagine that when they announced that they're going to be working on their games, that they just got flooded with requests. Yeah, I mean their studio is really really blowing up. It's great to see. Happens a lot in Hollywood, YouTube. Yeah.
Left. And so when people asked us what we were doing, and I said, I'm starting a company, people we knew said they wanted to come work for us. People at local companies said, hey, what are you doing? I'd love to join a startup. And resumes just arrived.
By the way, if you have money too and you're like this, you do get flooded. I mean, even me without having money, I mean, people are just wanting to join a part of it because I know that what I am trying to achieve is very positive for developers. So of course, a lot of developers want to work with me because I'm promising things that will mean a better work-life balance. We're working on interesting games. We're not locking ourselves to a single genre. It's great to see. I love having so many people interested in helping, but also without the money, I can't say yes to any of them yet. So it kind of sucks, but I know once we get funding coming in that I can start to build this dream team, and we can make the games of our dreams.
Especially after Arcanum went out. 3 years into Troika, a lot of resumes arrived. And that's when we hired a lot of new people for Temple of Elemental Evil and Vampire Bloodlines. I mean, we really staffed up. We went from being 14 people to like 35 people in a few months.
Wow.
So we were in a very unique position. Once you make a game, you will probably start getting resumes. As far as choosing or even approaching publishers, we were lucky because we lived in LA. Tons of publishers up there. Also in San Diego. I mean, we could get in a car and an hour later we could be at Activision, EA, Sony.
That's
Big
nice.
publishers.
That's very nice.
So we'd go to them. We'd call them up, email them, make appointments. Because we had Fallout under our belts, that did open doors. Didn't necessarily open wallets, but it opened doors. At least got us in there, let us say our piece. As for getting funding for a game, let me just tell you, the only time we've ever done that is as part of a publisher deal. I was never an indie. We were never self-funded. We never used venture capital. We never approached VCs. So I don't know that part of it. All I know is during the negotiation with the publisher, that's when you establish the budget. I want to remind you, too, when you're establishing the budget, you have to think a lot more than just the direct game development costs.
A lot of business costs.
And if you've
and
taken any
unforeseen
business
things.
classes or even know a little bit about business, you already know that, in addition to someone's salary, you got to add things like their insurance, their portion of the office space,
potential raises too,
and taxes, and all the things that go overhead. Most people say, you add 10, 20, 30% to their base cost. And that.
Yeah, that's what I do. So for the salaries that we have in our In our budget, I add about 33% on top of that to account for everything that we can think of. Things like you said, insurance, any costs that we need to buy, like software licenses, or if we want to give that person a raise at some point, we want to budget that as well. So it adds up. I mean, that's why you see, it costing so much for people, just what it costs.
That'll cover it. But you also have to remember that there's hardware in the office that's not being covered, software,
Mm-hmm.
office, additional office space. It's like you can't just figure out, oh, they sit in an office, so I'll take that office. There's conference rooms, there's kitchen, there's
Even without an office space, because we're going to be a fully remote studio, which I kind of hate, but it is what it is. We might need to pay for somebody to rent an office still because they can't work from home, for instance, which I very much understand. In which case, we would pay for that and allow them to work there. So, it's there's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of overhead.
stuff you stock the kitchen with, there's utilities, there are people who work not directly in game dev. There's
You're right,
your
Lazaro.
receptionist, there's HR, there's admin, there's all
Yep.
kinds of people who do things that aren't directly associated with the game. In addition to that, you will have corporate taxes. You also pay taxes on employees. Like in the US, there's a tax that's half paid by the company and half paid by the employee. So you owe taxes and it's proportional to how much you pay them. Then there's insurance that doesn't have to do, it's not the medical or dental insurance that you're paying for the employee. Your company gets insured itself. I'll give you an example.
I will say, as a sole member LLC, we don't pay corporate tax. What instead happens is it's because the taxes get lumped in with me. So, for instance, any payments that we get from a publisher go to me, but then I deduct the business expenses from that. So, let's say we get $100,000 payment from a publisher. I then deduct business expenses like salaries, whatever else does not go directly to me, and then anything else is considered my take home, right? Because after business expenses would be my take home or our company's capital, right? Our just cash that we have on hand, and that would then have to get taxed before it goes into the bank, or it has to be taxed before I get to hold on to it into the bank for company expenses. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, he's right, and I think we can avoid certain things too. It depends. I have to talk to both lawyers here in Poland and lawyers in US because we would be hiring people on like contract from overseas. So we don't have to pay some of the things that you would have to pay in the US because they're not technically employees, right? They're contractors, which also means they don't have certain benefits, although we would include the benefits within their contracts. So things like health insurance or, what have you. If we wanted to do a retirement matching, things like that. So, yeah, it's going to be a bit more complicated for us than if we were just incorporated in the U.S. We hire U.S. Employees, and it's kind of all boilerplate. Things will be a bit more challenging for us here with Microraptor Games, but I think we can help to not only save a bit more money, but because of that, as a company, then I can give more money to my employees. Hopefully, that's the desire. Less government, or less money to government, more money to employees.
We were told when we were making Temple of Elemental Evil that we needed E&O insurance. That's called errors and omission. That's a special insurance that you buy so that if you ever make a product that gets sued because you either left something out that was important or put something in that caused a problem. In a game, maybe you're sued because people say, "Hey, you put something in, you ripped us off. We copyrighted that. It's maybe you didn't buy some software that you used, or you used an idea from another game and you used it too closely." Because you can't copyright an idea, but you can copyright the instantiation of an idea. E&O covers that. Interestingly enough, they asked for it and we're like, okay, and I threw it in as a line item on what they had to pay us. And they're like, we're not going to pay you for that. And I was like, you want it, you have to pay for it. And let me tell you, E&O insurance back in the early 2000s was almost $1 million, which was over a third of what they were even paying us to do Temple. So they didn't want to do it. So I'm like, pay for you want it, pay for it, or strike it
What
out.
the
It eventually
fuck?
went away. But there's other insurances you may need to get as a company doing business in whatever you're
That's
looking or
wild.
whatever area you're doing business in. So you have to look into that. Um, Speaking of insurance, though, you're going to have to at least do medical, dental, vision, at least in the US, for your employees, which means contacting a bunch of insurance companies, talking to insurance agents. Like I said, we had Sharon do that. I would recommend that if you start a company, one of the first things you plan to hire is someone in HR that handles a lot of these things.
Yep, we
And
have
by the
a.
way, that again that's an expense that you're going to have to include in however you're getting your games funded. Banking. I remember desperately wanting to use the credit union that I personally was at, but they did not allow business accounts. And the reason you need a business account is once you incorporate, you get a tax ID, and any financial accounts you have to be associated.
You need to separate it. Yeah, it's one thing I have to do as well. Which is why on last year's tax return I didn't actually claim any deductions. Uh, Not only because I not didn't pay taxes because I don't make any money, but because I currently don't have a separate account, which is pretty shitty. But I can't open a new account in the U.S. because I need to go to the U.S. to do that, and I can't go to the U.S. right now because lots of legal bullshit. But I can't leave the country at the moment. So yeah, you really need to separate those. Have two completely different accounts, no overlap for your business and your personal stuff. And even if because it's good for the IRS, it's just good for your ability to quickly download all of the invoices from the business account and use those for your tax returns, right?
With that ID. So we ended up getting a bank account at a bank I hate. I've always hated them. I still hate them. But it also turned out that we couldn't have used a credit union anyway because most of them don't allow wires, financial wires. But I don't know if they still use that, but some credit unions don't allow transfers the way banks do, especially if it's happening internationally. And you never know if you work at a big publisher where your money's going to come from. For all you know, you may be working with a publisher who's sending your money from London. So you have to have a bank account that can accept an international money
Yes.
transfer. Look into that. I talked about making sure that you included a bunch of overhead in the cost of your game development for your funding. I want to deep dive into that for a second about offices.
I mean, I'll even show that too with our budget. Actually, where is it? What relation does Tim have to Unreal? I see the logo. Yeah, I saw the logo too. He might have just gotten sent that. I don't think he has any direct relation. Nope, that's not it. Direct relation with Unreal, but he was probably sent that, or he probably picked it up at a conference or something. We have down here, right? Like this is our unadjusted salaries for developing the game, and this is the gross cost. So this is on top of that gross adjustment, so 1.33 times. So we're adding 33% on top of the salaries. So you have here the direct salaries, and then this is the adjusted by 33% to account for all those things we mentioned, like taxes, insurance, what have you. And then with the budget, we have some additional things down here for additional, like non-dev personnel, for instance, like that would be like HR or legal stuff. People we need to hire contractually that aren't related directly to the game's development, but are related to the business. It is what it is, right? And that's just it all goes towards making a game more expensive. But that's how it is. That's what game development is. There's a lot of that little money that goes on behind the scenes, and it sucks, but so be it.
Because first of all, you're going to have to estimate right away how many people are going to be working on your game maximum and make sure you have enough office space for them, because the cost of course is square footage. So you're going to have to know how many people you're going to have and figure out if you have enough space to put them in. People always underestimated this in the 90s, and that's why at one point I was crammed into a room with 13 other people. It was a
Jesus.
nightmare. It's Imagine trying to code when you have a fax printer right next to your head. One thing you really want to look at is whether your office includes utilities. Some do, some don't, some partially do. Like there include water but not electricity. The reason I bring this up is our electric bill at Troika was way higher than anyone estimated it to be. When you get an office space, you can often ask them to estimate utilities. Our electric bill was way higher.
Estimate utilities for average office versus estimated for game dev, where you have so much electronic bullshit running all the time. It's way higher, yeah. I mean, electricity bills for game dev is scary.
For multiple reasons. One, we had a lot more computers than regular offices had back then. You know, some people didn't have computers. We had people who had multiple computers. It was very
Yep.
common to have two computers on the desk of most of the 3D artists and even some of the programmers, because that way they could compile stuff on the side, um, render art on the side. So, and often those were left running overnight.
Yep.
So most companies, everybody went home at night and the electric bill dropped. Ours stayed high. That included AC. If people are there, and then with the AC on, having all those extra computers generated a lot of heat. Our AC bill was astronomical. Another thing to look into is whether your office includes parking spaces. Usually, there's a parking lot associated with your office, and they will say you have these number of spaces, and it's based on their estimate of how you're going to put people into those offices. It always seemed really low. Like there were these big offices that at any company I'd ever worked at would hold 2 or 3 people, and they said, "Oh no, that's for one person." So there was one parking spot. So we would commonly go to some place and they're like, here's your building. There are your 10 parking spots. And we're like, there's going to be 15 of us. So sometimes you have to pay for the extra parking. Sometimes they'll go, well, you only have 10 reserved, and then there's a spot
Oh my god, what a nightmare.
that's first come, first serve. And then you end up with
Are they
people who,
mining
if
their
they
Bitcoin?
come to work later in the day, which many game developers did, they couldn't find parking. That happened at companies I worked at. We tried to avoid that at Troika. You also have to think of hours. If you rent in an office building, and basically any building where you don't have direct access from the outside, like we bought a lot of office spaces in industrial areas where, your door was walked right into your own reception area. If you're getting an office building where you have to go in to a lobby and maybe take an elevator up to your floor, you have to find out about access. Your
Yep.
employees will require key cards to get in. There will be security guards. Names may have to go on lists because they say this person may be here at night or maybe coming in on the weekend or whatever. Especially if you have people who want to work different shifts. We had some people who wanted to work slightly outside of core hours. Sometimes we had to come in outside of core hours to talk to people who weren't in our time zones. Cleaning was often, if you worked in a big high rise, cleaning was included, but it was very specific hours. So sometimes they would be scheduled to come in at 6 because most people left at 5. And usually a lot of people were still there, so they had to clean around them. So they didn't do as good a cleaning job. Sometimes the cleaning staff would complain that the office was still in full, motion and they had to come in and clean. If you have your own space, you have to hire your own cleaning services. You have to decide, is it every day? Is it 3 times a week? Is it once a week? What's going to be enough for you? Cost.
It all
Now,
adds
Seth, a
up.
lot of your other questions, you asked about PR, advertising, localization, distribution. Those were all things because we didn't sell fund. We weren't indie. We weren't VC. Those were things
Publisher.
that the publisher handled. So
We're gonna need that too.
those were things that were part of their duty to do, and it's why we received a very small percentage of royalty that usually didn't kick in until you sold a lot. But I talked about that in the publisher contract video already. So I'm not going to talk about that here because that wasn't something I had to think about. It was handled by someone else. So I think, Seth, that's all the stuff I can answer about the business side of things based on what I can remember and the few notes I have and the one company I ran. I hope this helps. And I know a lot of other people have asked questions about this too. So I'm glad I finally
Yeah.
did a video about this.
That was nice. It was good stuff. I think, that gave me some things to think about. And yeah, it just doubles down on that aspect of there are so many little costs that add up. And, people wonder why. Why does a game cost millions of dollars to make? Well, it's like You look at the salaries. If you look at all the stuff you have to pay for, licenses, computers, you know, you have to, in some cases, pay for office spaces, which are very expensive. It's a lot of money that goes behind it. It's an awful lot of money. It's what we when we were talking about. You know, Larian Studio said that they didn't expect Baldur's Gate 3 to sell so many copies, and they also talked about how they probably had to cut certain content to get the game released. It's because if they wanted to continue developing the game and get that, especially the third act, to a more playable state, less buggy than at launch, they probably would have had to spend 20 to 30 million dollars more at least, considering how many people they had working on the company, how many different buildings and offices they have around the world. I mean, that might even be a way smaller number than it actually is. It might be closer to 50 million. So yeah, I mean, when you're up against that, where you're like, okay, it's going to cost us this much money to delay the game by another quarter, even, or even, you know, half a year, you can see why they would make a decision. Let's just cut certain content. Let's get the game out because we don't think sales are going to be that high anyway, and just see if we can make some money back from this. Air conditioners, everybody needs a parking spot. Well, we also have bigger houses because of that. I'll take it. Fun with why do Hollywood movies cost millions of dollars and watch them figure it out on their own? I mean, yeah, Hollywood movies, like you have hundreds of people. I mean, the credits for Lord of the Rings, isn't the credits for Lord of the Rings like 30 minutes long? It's just packed with like hundreds, if not over 1,000 names. It's like, okay, each of those people, what do you pay them? You know? But you pay for their insurance too, especially if they're working on set there. You know, there might be some dangers involved, so now you have to pay for insurance there. It's like, this is a crazy, stupid amount of money. If an average employee you're spending, you know, 70, let's say $70,000 on, and you have to pay about 30% on top of that for other costs associated with that employee, you're looking at nearly 100,000 US dollars for one employee. Multiply that by 10. That's just 10 people. You're already at $1 million for 1 year. A game takes like 3-4 years to make. Well, now you're at 3 to 4 million for just 10 people. And that's not including other costs, like he said, associated with business. If you have an office premises, it just adds up really, really, really fast. Which is why when we look on Kickstarter and we see games that are asking for some small pittance amount of money, and they're also stating how they're like working in an office, all these things, you know, I start to think in my mind, okay, are they actually even asking for enough money or not? And if they're not, then this amount that they're asking for and saying we can make this game for this amount, it's like, no, you can't. No, you can't. Yeah, it all adds up. Either way, this was great. Definitely, I'll share the link in chat for people who may want to watch that on their own. We will move on to the next video. I will end the YouTube video for that one there. But yeah, I should have more of these up today. So if you're watching on YouTube and you like this, there will be more of these up hopefully later today.